All right, go ahead, Mr. Jambais.
I think Mr. Albee does.
You're correct. Would you come back? Oh. Go ahead, Mr. Albee.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Mitchell, we were discussing what happens when a computer is turned on without first doing a write block. You recall that general subject?
Yes.
And you acknowledge that from your examination, there's evidence that this computer that was seized from the Jensen home had been turned on December 17th, 1998, right?
Right.
And by turning on that computer, data on that computer was changed, right?
Correct.
And it's impossible to determine exactly in what ways it was changed, true?
True.
You don't know what data's been overwritten, right?
Correct.
You don't know how much data was overwritten, right?
Correct.
Dates and times get changed, right?
Yes.
When you did your search,
I want to, this was a subject of some discussion the other day, and I want to be clear on what you mean by dates and times get changed.
well,
I just, lest the record be confusing.
actually, there's no testimony on direct about this, and so I'm trying to clarify that.
Go ahead.
So it's clarified. There are, for instance, if you go to a file that you've been at before, at the very least, you'll change a last access date, correct?
Correct.
And so if somebody had been at that, looking at that file on an earlier date that turned out to be very important, we would lose that information, correct?
On a last access date, yes.
Right, I mean, and I'm just making up a date, but let's just say November 19th was critically important because of where people were in this case, that we could prove somebody was on vacation or whatever. And again, this is completely a hypothetical. And you could and on December 3rd, it showed that the computer was used on November 19th. If somebody went to that file on December 17th, it would be, we'd lose that information, right? It would change last access date from November 19th.
That's correct.
And just by turning it on, you create files, correct?
You change dates and times.
Well, you also create files too, right?
Yeah, it's possible, yes.
Well, you know, for example, that cabinet files are created, a cabinet file is created every time you turn it on, right?
A cabinet file?
Yes.
I'm not clear what do you mean by a cabinet file?
This is a Windows 98 operating system, right?
Correct.
And by default, that system would create backups of user.dat, system.dat, win.ini, and the system.ini files, right?
I believe so, yes.
And those would all be written to a cabinet folder. True?
I'm not positive on
Cabinet
that.
file? Okay. But those files, those backup files are created, right?
Correct.
And so they take up some space on the computer, true?
Yes.
And so if they take up space that's previously occupied by some other file, that file may disappear from the computer, right?
I suppose it's possible.
Well, that's what happens is you overwrite files when you create new files, correct?
It doesn't necessarily overwrite files. It could be in an empty space.
Right, and let's just try to explain this. When you create a new file, it has to take up space on the computer, correct?
Correct.
And it will it's random whether it decides to take empty space or space that's currently being used by some deleted file, right?
Correct.
And so you could lose the information from the deleted file, right?
I suppose it's possible.
Well, it's not just possible, it's as likely as it is that it took free space, right?
Right. It's possible that it overwrote, or it's possible that it went into an empty space.
Right. And when you turn it on, you create a bunch of new files, right?
new files can be created.
And some of these are likely or almost certain to overwrite other data. True?
It's not almost certain. The computer works, like you said, in a random fashion, so it's possible.
And we never know what was overwritten, right?
Correct.
And did you make any effort to determine how many new files were created?
How many new files? No.
Did you make any effort to determine how many files were modified?
In what, when you, over what period or by what act, or, I'm not clear.
On the activity of turning on that computer, well, you know that it was turned on December 17th, right?
Correct.
And you also know that whoever turned it on also looked at files, right?
I don't know that. I wasn't there.
Well, did you look to see in your forensic examination whether they looked at files?
Files, dates, and times can be overwritten by the operating system or by the user. Unless I was there, I cannot determine.
Well, you did some work on Quicken, right?
By work, you mean?
Well, you looked at the Quicken files in this case, right?
Correct.
You did an examination of the Quicken files, right?
Correct.
And it was clear that somebody looked at those Quicken files on December 17th, right?
The Quicken files, some of the last access dates were changed.
So somebody looked at it on December 17th?
I don't know that for sure. I don't know if the way the operating system was set up, whether the backup files or the home file on the Quicken was touched by merely booting the computer, or if somebody opened up those files.
Well, you're aware that a Quicken backup file was created on December 17th, right?
Correct.
And wouldn't that require the user to do something?
Not necessarily.
Did you make any effort to find out how Quicken worked so you could determine that?
No, I didn't.
Did you ask the people who were looking around on the computer to find out what exactly they had done?
No, sir.
Wouldn't you be interested in finding out the extent to which information could have been contaminated by their activities?
Objection, Your Honor. What might interest this witness or not?
Overruled.
I have no way to even contact the person that turned that computer on December 17th.
Well, you understand that Detective Ratsberg was there, right?
I understand he was there for a portion of the time.
Did you talk to him about what files they looked at?
I believe I asked Detective Ratsberg what the reason was for turning the computer on that day. And he said, I guess I can't recall exactly what he said, something to the effect that they wanted to see if there was anything that stood out that could lead them or help them in their investigation. We didn't get into specifics. I don't believe Detective Ratsberg's knowledge of how the computer works, I don't think he was able to answer those questions specifically.
And you know through your training that that never should have been done, right?
According to the training I've had, the computer should not have been turned on without being right blocked.
Do you have some question about the quality of your training in that regard?
Absolutely not.
I mean, and so you firmly believe that that computer should never have been turned on December 17th, right?
I know that I wouldn't have done it that way.
Well, and that's what every single training session you've ever had has indicated, correct?
My training, correct.
And you keep on saying my training like there's some other training that says go ahead and turn on the computer. Are you aware of anybody who says that that's a good idea?
I didn't have this training back in 1998, so I don't know what the previous examiner's training said. All I can tell you is what my training has told me.
Do you have any reason to believe that the training used to be just go ahead and turn on the computer?
I don't have that reason, no.
Now, I asked you some questions about your experience, and I think in fairness, I got pulled away, and I don't think I went through that entirely. And I think I'll just mark your CV. Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to show you your curriculum vitae. It's marked Defendant's Exhibit 106. And that's your CV for short,
Correct.
also essentially known as a resume, right?
Correct.
And under professional experience, it indicates that, it says Wisconsin Department of Justice, Division of Criminal Investigation, Computer Crimes Analyst. It says January 1999 to present. And you testified, you began doing computer crimes issues in 2003, is that right?
Correct.
So even though this says January 1999, you actually were employed in a different capacity by the Wisconsin Department of Justice from 1999 to 2003?
That's correct.
And what were you doing during that period of time?
I was an office management specialist with the Division of Narcotics Enforcement.
Office management specialist?
Correct.
And what were your duties there?
My duties were to, I was the office manager of that division, and I did various duties from taking care of agents' needs, vehicle placements, asset forfeiture.
Okay, that work did not involve in any way computer forensics?
No.
No examination of computers
No.
was involved? So you began the computer forensics, your computer forensics career fresh in 2003?
Correct.
And page 2 of your resume lists the, I think it's 10 trainings that you've attended, correct?
Correct.
One of those listed as a Microsoft Certified System Engineering course. What is that?
There's a series of courses from Microsoft System Engineering that I received when I worked for the Department of Health and Family Services.
Is that computer forensics, or is that more like an IT kind of?
It's more like an IT.
Was there any computer forensics associated with those
No.
hours? I would move defendant's exhibit, I'm sorry, what number is that, Ms. Mitchell? 102?
D106.
106.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
It will be received.
The other day on direct examination, you testified that the first evidence of ethylene glycol you found on the computer was on November 10th. Is that right?
Correct.
And when we went through that PowerPoint, I don't recall seeing any slides associated with ethylene glycol for November 10th. Is that right?
That's correct.
So where was your evidence of ethylene glycol on November 10th?
One of the pages displayed in the PowerPoint from November 10th was just probably, it was the first page of that specific website. And the ethylene glycol reference was a little deeper into that website.
Okay. Well, let me take this up now. I was going to do it later. We looked at, in that PowerPoint, a number of web pages, right?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Jamboys and yourself, you kept referring to saying and things like, and the next site was, and that wouldn't technically be correct. It wasn't, you weren't going from one site to another, true?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
Sure. During the PowerPoint, when we went from one slide to the next slide, oftentimes the question was, and the next site is, and then you talk about what showed up in the next slide. And most of the time, what we were seeing was another web page, not another website, true?
Sometimes that may have been correct, yes.
That is, for example, if I go to the Green Bay Packers website, that's a website, right?
Correct.
If we say it's packers.com. And then once there, I can click on stats or their schedule or something like that, and then what's displayed is a web page within the site, right?
Correct.
And then once, if I go stats, then I can click on Brett Favre specifically and go to another page within that site. True?
True.
Okay. And for instance, if I clicked on statistics for on the Green Bay Packers site, I may get a whole bunch of web pages. It may be a long list of statistics, right? Maybe screen after screen after screen that I could scroll down to see all the statistics.
Correct.
And when we went through this PowerPoint, you were only showing us selected slides. Would that be fair to say?
In this particular PowerPoint, we were showing the first page of the site due to to save time.
And some of these sites or pages, there may have been many other pages, right?
Correct.
There may have been 50 more computer screens full of pages or information associated with the one page you went to, right?
There may have been.
And just so everybody understands, so that PowerPoint wasn't complete as to all the information there, true?
The PowerPoint that we showed didn't have all the pages associated to each site.
And if that had been a complete document, it would be very, very long, fair to say?
Very long.
Now, November 10th was the first time ethylene glycol showed up, you indicated, right?
That I found.
And November 10th is also the day that there were searches conducted for suicide, right?
I guess I'd have to refer to the
Sure.
notes.
And Ms. Mitchell, you're looking at your own copy of States Exhibit 89, is that right? Is that the PowerPoint?
Correct.
November 10th. Yeah, just that, maybe even that summary page. Oh, you can't? Oh, okay.
Okay. Yes, suicide was accessed on November 10th.
Okay, if you go back to, sorry. We get one more screen. Two the other way. Yeah, right there. And is that what we're seeing on the screen, that there's a search for suicide?
Correct.
And that's the same day that ethylene glycol first showed up, true?
True.
Did you have a chance to see whether any user of the Jensen computer had subscribed to any news groups?
I did not.
So you're unaware of whether the news group alt.suicide was subscribed to?
I'm not aware of that.
Did you look at all?
I didn't look for the news group, no.
And that's something you could have looked for on the computer to see whether people have been subscribed to news groups?
Yes, I suppose so.
And you can understand that a person who's looking at a suicide site might have an interest in suicide, right?
I
Objection calls
suppose.
for speculation of our witnesses to others.
Sustained.
Exhibit 88, which we haven't shown to the jury, but that's this list of what are called internet files, right?
Okay, yes.
Let's see. Right here.
Yep.
And internet files, that's what we've been looking at on the screen. Is that right?
That's correct.
And where were these internet files recovered from on the computer?
From the temporary internet files folder.
Okay. And tell me what an temporary internet file is.
Temporary internet file is the folder houses internet sites that have been looked at.
Okay. So if I chose today, again, just sticking with my Packers website example, if I got on my computer right now, looked up Green Bay Packers, went to 10 different pages within the Green Bay Packers website, and then I shut off my computer for the day, you would believe that those pages would be stored in the temporary internet file? Is that
Yes.
right? And I can go to the temporary internet file and pull up what I had previously looked at, true?
True.
And those temporary internet files also can be deleted by the user, true?
True.
And that's not a very difficult or sophisticated task to do, correct?
Guess that depends on who you are.
Well, it requires about a 3 or 4 step process, right?
Correct.
All right. And the operating system, that is the computer itself, the operating system and the computer, will also delete the temporary internet files?
Objection, Your Honor. There's no foundation. This witness is actually an expert as to computer operating systems. She's a data retrieval expert. No
Overall.
foundation.
Overall.
It's possible, yes.
And how does that work? How does the operating system delete the temporary internet files?
The operating system works on a random basis.
And when you say random basis, does that mean that if I was on that Packer site today, and I went back tomorrow, and then I went back the next day, it could randomly eliminate even a 1-day-old temporary internet file?
I wouldn't think so. I'm not positive on how the Windows 98 operating system worked in that respect.
And what causes it to eliminate temporary internet files? Does the operating system do that every time I create new temporary internet files?
I object, Your Honor. There's no evidence that this witness is an expert as to the 1998 Windows operating system. There's no foundation for this.
But I think that some of the testimony that she's given has been about the procedures that they go into the creation and the deletion of the evidence which existed on the computer, and so the objection's overruled.
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Yes, could I please have that read back?
Question, and what causes it to eliminate temporary internet files? Does the operating system do that every time I create new temporary internet files?
No.
So what causes the temporary internet files to be randomly eliminated?
I don't know.
It would be fair to say when we've looked at all these screens, first of all, you've indicated that there are additional pages associated with these web pages that are not part of the PowerPoint, right?
Correct.
And then undoubtedly there would be other web pages that when they became, that were deleted after they became temporary internet files, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, this is by no means a complete record of what happened on the Jensen computer between July and December 1998, right?
Correct.
And you don't know what's missing from that record, right?
I don't know everything that's missing, no.
And it's impossible to ever tell. That's one of the limitations of computer forensics, right?
Correct.
And then Exhibit 90 is something different called Internet History, right?
Correct.
And with Internet History, you just get the names of the websites that were visited, correct?
You get the host name for the site, and then most often you'll get some extra information regarding that site.
And if you could go to page 19.
Is this files or history?
This is history. This is Exhibit S90. Are you at page 19?
Yes.
And I believe Mr. Jamboys was asking you questions about entries on November 22nd, 1998 at 2:43:35 p.m. Do you recall those questions?
Not specifically, sorry.
Okay. But at 2:43:35 p.m., the host site was anatomy.atom.com. Do you recall that?
I'm sorry, Counselor, what date and time are you talking about?
11/22/98, 2:43:35 p.m. Someone went to the website, it appears, anatomy.atom.com, right?
Correct.
And then there were questions, as I recall it, Ms. Mitchell, where you were asked about how many times somebody went to that anatomy.atom site that day. Do you recall those kind of questions?
How many times?
Right.
How many times they went to that site, or they went to that site at least once?
Right, and my concern was, at the time, it sounded, this Internet History lists anatomy.atom maybe 15 times, correct?
There's quite a few.
And that doesn't mean that somebody just kept going back to that site. It means that they were navigating within that site, correct?
Correct.
They were skipping from page to page within that site.
That's how it appears, yes.
And again, it's like if I went to greenbaypackers.com, I went to stats, and then I started checking all the offensive player stats, I might end up with a list of 12 or 15 different pages in the Internet History that I visited over the course of a couple minutes, correct?
Correct.
And so it would be somewhat misleading to suggest that somebody repeatedly visited that site simply because it's entered in the Internet History a number of times.
Objection, it's irrelevant what might be misleading and why, because nothing like that has happened.
Rephrase your question.
It would be an erroneous impression, it would be an erroneous understanding to conclude that somebody went back to the anatomy.atom site 15 times in those 10 minutes, right?
Objection, it would be irrelevant what might be an erroneous impression, Your Honor. What difference does that make?
Did you say would or could?
It would. That would be a wrong, and I think I changed my erroneous impression, I thought, but that would be erroneous to conclude that these entries mean the person went back to anatomy.atom.com over and over again.
There is, and to an extent, it is speculative in the sense that you use the word would as opposed to could.
It is an erroneous conclusion.
The problem is someone could purposely revisit the same site several times. Is that not?
Well, I don't know. The witness might be able to tell us.
Well, I don't
mean,
know. I think the question in the form in which you're asking it is objectionable.
Well, this list of anatomy.adam.com, Ms. Mitchell, it's clear that somebody's just navigating between the web pages, right?
That's how it appears.
And it's not a repeated visiting of the website, correct?
On that specific date and time, correct.
There was some testimony about some emails that you recovered on the Jensen computer, correct?
Correct.
And did you see any evidence that anyone in the Jensen household had email set up on that computer to use?
I believe there was an email, an account through execpc.com.
Was it ever used?
I recall finding it maybe once.
So you think during this July to December period, if the email account was used, it was used once?
I believe so, that I found.
Any of these emails that you were describing that are between Kelly and Mr. Jensen were not received or sent from the Jensen exec PC account that they had on their home computer, true?
I don't believe I found any.
Right, so from your investigation, there weren't any, true?
True.
The vast majority of these, well, virtually all of these emails that you located were actually in the temporary internet files, right?
No, I don't believe that's true. I believe some were recovered out of unallocated space.
Oh, okay. An unallocated space, that means that a file can end up in, well, why don't you tell me, how does a file end up in unallocated space?
It's deleted.
Can you hear the answer?
It's deleted.
That is, if I delete a temporary internet file, or if the operating system deletes a temporary internet file, that file may end up in unallocated space?
It will end up in unallocated space.
Okay. And you need to use forensic tools to be able to recover that information from unallocated space?
If it's still there.
And you may only have part of the information.
Correct.
Some of it may get overwritten.
Correct.
And eventually all of it will be overwritten.
It's fair to say.
And so you found some emails in the temporary internet files, right?
I'm not sure.
You don't recall one way
I
or
don't
another?
recall without going back through and looking.
Okay. And did you think you found most of them then in unallocated space?
I guess I'm not sure.
Well, the emails you looked at, it appeared that they had been looked at over the internet, right?
Correct.
And it appeared that someone had gone to the Stiefel Nicholas site, perhaps, to look at the emails, right?
Correct.
Not necessarily to create emails, but to look at old emails from the office, right?
I believe both.
Right. I mean, but the first part is someone at various times looked at office emails, true?
Correct.
And then on October 25th, is that the only, well, on October 25th, there was some evidence of someone going into the Stiefel site and sending an email. Is that correct?
I would have to look back. I believe it was the 25th or 26th of October,
Sure,
yes.
feel free. And you're looking at the Internet History, Exhibit 90?
Yes, page 14, October 25th, someone was accessing the intranet site for Stiefel.
In order to send an email?
To go into the email account, that's for sure.
Do you know if any emails were ever sent from the Jensen home?
Via the intranet intrasite from Stiefel?
Yeah.
I believe so.
And when was that?
Well, I'd have to compare what information I have from the internet history showing the intranet sites where Stiefel's email was accessed versus the dates and times on the emails. But I believe October 25th is a good example of emails that actually we saw and read that would correspond.
And that's the only day for which there's evidence that the intranet, the Stiefel intranet, INTRA net, was accessed, right?
I'm not sure that that's true.
Well, could you take a look at, you'd be able to tell that from Exhibit 90?
Sure, you want me to page through every page? Okay, that's correct. According to the internet history, Stiefel intranet was accessed on October 25th. It's the only log.
That's the only evidence you have of the internet was October 25th. True?
On the history, correct.
Or anywhere else, right?
I believe so.
But you're aware from what you obtained from unallocated space that emails were looked at other times, true?
True.
And the emails that were looked at, again, appeared to be ones that had been created at the office, and someone was just looking to see what Mark Jensen was doing with his emails in the office, true?
I would have no way of knowing that.
Well, you would know that someone looked at emails that were created at the office, right?
I would have no knowledge of where they were created. They could have been created from the home computer accessing the intranet site, and the history wasn't recoverable.
The times of the emails certainly would coincide with daytime activity, correct?
I would have to look at all the emails. There's 37 emails, I believe, recovered.
Okay. And do you recall from having, you've looked at those a number of times, right?
Correct.
And do you recall that most of them had daytime timestamps on them?
I know a lot of them did. I wouldn't say all of them.
And you've made no effort to identify with any specificity whether those are daytime emails or nighttime emails? True.
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
You indicated that, well, I'd have to look at the emails to know if they were created during basically sort of the daytime workday or not. And you haven't made any effort to do that up to this point, that's what I'm asking.
I don't think that's true. Just because I can't photographically remember what every email's date and time stamp is doesn't mean I didn't make an effort to pay attention to the date and time.
Well, did you write a report or write any notes as summarizing when the emails were sent or received?
No.
Do you have any notes in your file that are handwritten?
I don't believe so.
Right. Now, we were shown these monthly activity charts. This one is for July 1998, and it states Exhibit 46. Where do I start? Who prepared this chart?
The Department of Justice Intelligence Department.
What data did they rely on in preparing it?
Some of the data was from my computer examination.
Well, do you know specifically who made this chart?
I believe Julie Newby and Sue Hoffman.
Okay. And, well, I'm just wondering, for example, I mean, let's just take July 13th as an example. It says internet activity 11:32 p.m. How was it determined to enter internet activity 11:32 p.m. on July 13th?
I believe that would have come off of the internet history.
And so are these charts, just so I understand, do they include both the internet files and the internet history?
I believe they were derived just from the internet history.
Just the internet history?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, what is a cookie is not the same as a website, right?
Correct.
And what is a cookie?
A cookie is a reference that the computer sends out. When you go to a website, the website can send a cookie back to your computer so that your computer knows that you've been to that site before. And when you revisit that site, the computer houses the information from the last time you were there, and will look for an update to that website when you go back. It kind of knows you've been there before. It caches it so that all the information doesn't have to be downloaded again.
What's a third-party cookie?
I'm not sure.
Well, you're aware that you can have a cookie on your computer for a website that you've never been to, correct?
You can have a cookie on your computer for a website you've never been to?
Correct.
I guess I'm not aware of that.
Have you ever seen, for example, when you're doing your forensic examinations, doubleclick.com?
In history?
Correct.
I believe so.
And do you believe that that's a site that people go to?
I don't know what doubleclick.com is.
Well, aren't there companies that use cookies to try to keep track of internet traffic and how often people go to certain sites?
Yes.
And they install cookies for third parties. right?
I suppose that's true, yes.
And you've also seen in your forensic examination something called, for example, sextracker.com, right?
Objection, Your Honor, this is irrelevant unless she saw it with respect to this particular examination. And she's seen other cases.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that somebody went to a site called sextracker.com. That again is another cookie used to follow traffic, isn't it?
I guess that would depend. It could mean both.
So you are aware that you can have a cookie on your computer for a site you've never been to, true?
True.
Let me come back to this in just a second. There's something I omitted. Did you look for passwords on the Jensen computer or user IDs?
I looked for user IDs.
And what user ID did you find?
Buddy.
Buddy, B-U-D-D-Y?
Correct.
And it appeared that anybody ever using the Jensen computer would be identified as user Buddy, correct?
Yes.
You didn't have to type in anything special to be Buddy, right?
Correct.
It looked like just turning it on would get you into the computer, correct?
That was the default.
There was no password protection that people had to enter to get on this computer, as far as you know,
No.
correct?
Correct.
And do you know whether passwords to get into certain sites were stored on the computer automatically?
I don't know that.
Did you check if the autocomplete feature was on?
I did not check.
An autocomplete would be that if I had a password for my name, it just said Craig Albee, and I typed in the C, the rest of my name would complete, right?
Correct.
And then I could just hit enter and I'd be in.
Sure.
Right? Or somebody else, if they put in the C, it would autocomplete, correct?
Correct.
It would be fair to say that in July, August, and September, you found very little recoverable data from the Jensen computer in terms of internet use?
I found less, I believe, in those months.
Well, on looking at internet history, which again is Exhibit 90, on July 16th, we have internet activity for almost 3 hours, true? Is that right?
That's correct.
And we have some activity on the 12th for 40 minutes and then 17 minutes, right?
Correct.
But this internet activity on July 13th is 1 minute. July 22nd, 1 minute. July 29th, 1 minute. July 30th, 1 minute. July 26th, 1 minute. Right?
That's what was recoverable.
Sure, and that's all I'm saying. We don't know how much the computer actually was used during July, right?
Correct.
Because it wasn't recoverable, right?
Possibly.
Right. And this is all that remains in terms of an internet record, correct?
In the history files, yes.
And you don't have any internet files in addition from that time, do you?
I don't.
In Exhibit 88?
Well, there's an HTML file on July 15th. One file. I mean, there might be fragments in the internet files.
Are you, I'm looking at Exhibit 88 and I do not see any entry for July 15th.
Oh, excuse me, that's in 97. It's dated 97, you're right.
So there's nothing extra in the internet files, right?
I don't believe so.
And in fact, for instance, like, let's just take July 26th where it says 11:40. If we look at the internet history, it says just a cookie was gone to that day, right?
On July 26th. Correct.
Something www.platinumcash.com.
Correct.
So we really have, other than that July 16th and July 12th, we don't have much information at all about what was done with the computer in July. That information seems to have been lost. True?
True.
August 1998. Well, and on August 2nd, for example, there's an indication that there's internet activity from 10:01 to 10:40, right? That's what the chart says?
Correct.
And really all we have is 4 cookies. One for ABC News, that's at, well, this is a good question right off the bat. Exhibit 90 says 9:01 p.m. That's when things, and this says 10:01.
That's due to daylight savings time. That would be the accurate 10:01 p.m. would actually be the time period in Wisconsin because of daylight savings time.
I don't understand. Are you saying Exhibit 90 is an error? Or is Exhibit 83 an error?
Objection, Your Honor. The question is argumentative. The witness did not say either one was an error. She said their times are different, and she was explaining why.
Well,
I'll go ahead. Is either Exhibit 90 or Exhibit 83 an error?
No,
Neither one?
neither one.
Either one says 9:01 and one says 10:01.
That's correct.
Okay. Exhibit 90 is supposed to be the time on the Jensen computer, correct?
Exhibit 90, its times are derived from the index.dat files, which houses internet history. They're decoded by a program called net analysis, which isn't sophisticated enough to know the difference between when daylight savings time is in effect and when it's not. So when you look at Exhibit 90, you'll see that the times and dates up until, I believe it's October 26th, will be off by an hour because of daylight savings time. On October, I believe it's 25th, they will go back to being the same.
Well, isn't being off by an hour an error?
Objection. Counsel's arguing with the witness, Your Honor. She just explained it.
I don't see it as an error.
Well, if I wanted to rely on this document and it was important to know what time something happened at, I could make a big mistake with this. True?
Objection, Your Honor, for this witness to speculate under what circumstances Mr. Albee will make a big mistake.
Overruled.
And I'll object to the speaking objections.
Go ahead and ask your next question.
Right, that would be problematic if I relied on this document. True?
Not if somebody explained it to you, I wouldn't think.
Well, another thing that could have been done is before this was admitted into evidence, it could have been corrected, right?
Objection, Your Honor. There's no indication there's grounds for need for an objection.
Look, it's cross-examination. He's entitled to ask the question.
Right?
Well, correcting it, the only way that I could have corrected it in your terms would be to run two separate reports out of net analysis and offset the time incorrectly according to the Jensen computer. So you might have said then that was an error.
And you didn't do that.
I didn't do that. I decoded them by the GMT offset the way they should be. However, like I stated before, net analysis isn't sophisticated enough to determine daylight savings time.
And you didn't tell us on direct that this was an hour off.
It wasn't asked.
Okay. In any event, there's an entry, according to the internet history, at 9:01, 9:09, 9:36, and 9:40. So there's no indication of continuous internet activity for 39 minutes, true?
That's true.
And those, again, are just cookies?
Those are cookies.
And we see again, well, we have internet activity on the 30th and internet activity on the 8th. And all of those entries are cookies. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so we only have evidence of a computer being used on three days in August. Correct? The internet being used.
Correct.
And does that suggest to you the possibility that a lot of information has been lost from August 1998?
Yes.
September, you have 8 minutes of activity, 1 minute of activity, 1 minute of activity, 2 1-minute periods of activity, 2 9-minute periods of activity, 1 minute, 1 minute. So we don't have very much information from September about use either, correct?
Correct.
Here we have States Exhibit 85, and that's internet usage by time of day, correct?
Yes.
And these are just number of internet hits? That's what's represented here?
Correct.
What are you considering to be an internet hit?
I believe internet hits is an interpretation of how many times the internet was accessed.
Well, and that's what I'm asking, what's the interpretation that's being used?
Where the information came from?
Well, I don't know what an internet hit means.
Well, my interpretation of that chart is that was internet activity.
Are you not sure how this chart was put together?
I'm pretty sure it was put together. The internet activity was charted. The number of hits, I believe, stands for how many times the internet was accessed during those hours.
Is this based on internet history, internet files, both? You don't know?
I don't know. It could be both.
Or it could be one or the other.
Correct.
And we went through the example earlier. Let me find another example. Oh, that was handy. When I went through this example of how anatomy.com is listed like 15 times,
Council, what exhibit are we in?
in Internet History, Exhibit 90, page 19. You see that? And so, is each time that somebody navigates from one web page within a site to another web page, does that count as an internet hit?
I'm not sure. You'd have to ask the people that created the chart.
Well, you were called to support the admission of this chart, right?
Correct.
But you don't know how it was prepared.
I know it was prepared from the evidence I gave the Intel department.
Well, if I go to anatomy.adam.com and then I go to another page within that, is that a second hit or not?
I already stated I don't know.
Does a cookie count as a hit?
I'm not sure.
Because you understand that a cookie might not mean you ever went to a particular site, right?
A cookie would still indicate internet activity.
Well, but if I go to ESPN.com and double-click, the double-click cookie is accessed, I only went to one site, right?
Possibly, yes.
And I'd have 2 internet hits.
Correct, which would indicate internet usage.
Well, but this chart is based on the number of internet hits. And so I'm trying to determine how we can know that it's accurate.
I guess you'd have to ask the people that created the chart.
Oh, I don't know what this. We have these times of day. Were these corrected for the daylight savings time? Is that what you said?
Yes.
And these were corrected for that?
Yes.
Okay. And this chart was prepared before the last hearing in July, right?
Correct.
And you're positive that it was corrected?
Positive.
Okay, so we have 400 hits here between 11 o'clock and 11:59. And so you believe that the person who prepared this chart went through every one of those hits and counted and changed it by an hour, if it needed to be changed by an hour.
Yes.
And how is it you know that?
There was very lengthy discussion as to the time and the time change.
And was that based on internet history or internet files?
I believe it was based on internet history. I guess I'm not 100% sure if internet files were incorporated into that.
Are internet files also off by an hour?
No.
Now, you also, chart number S84 and chart S82 were also internet usage by time of day, by number of internet hits. I take it you don't know, you can't tell me exactly what an internet hit is on those charts either.
Correct.
You prepared a keyword search graph in this case, right?
Correct.
Whoops. Did you prepare this?
No, sir.
How was this chart prepared?
That was prepared from the information that was given to the Intelligence Division.
And what information was that?
The information on the keyword searches that I did on the Jensen home computer.
So, tell me in what form you gave them this information.
I printed out the information off of the NCASE reports.
So you did this with NCASE?
The keyword searching?
Yes.
Yes.
And are these all the keywords that you searched?
I don't believe all of them.
Oh, there were other keywords that they chose not to put on the graph?
I believe so.
Do we have a record of the other keywords that you searched?
I don't have it here.
Oh, so but you did some other analysis that hasn't been produced here?
I believe the keywords that were eliminated were keywords such as the name Mark and the name Julie, and it was not put on the chart because there were thousands and thousands of hits on both of those names that weren't in any, most weren't in any relation to the case.
And that's the problem with the keyword search, is that you can search for a word that you think is meaningful, and it may show up a lot but not have any relation to the particular issues in the case. Fair to say?
Correct.
And there was a statement earlier on that poisoning was the word that showed up the most in the Jensen computer. And that wouldn't be precisely accurate, true?
True.
It's just the word, out of the words you chose, it's the word that shows up the most.
Correct.
And there were other words that showed up a lot more than poisoning.
Correct.
Another problem with the keyword search is when we were talking about the PowerPoint, and you indicated that in the PowerPoint we'd only see the first screen, right?
Right.
And there could be 50 screens behind it, right?
That's correct.
And a user, for instance, could be doing a search and click on a link and get a page that has 50 pages and immediately decide within seconds, oh, this isn't what I'm looking for, and go back to where they were, right? You understand how they do that?
Correct.
And the keyword search would count every word in those 50 pages, even though the person glanced at the first page for just a few seconds.
Correct.
And that would not be a very good reflection as to what the person's interest was in that particular word. True?
It's possible.
Now these key words that were chosen, I have a very good place to stand. Do we have that pointer?
Yes.
Never used one of these. Oh, I gotta hold it, all right. So words anarchist, anarchy, those were words that you had already, those were subjects you had already found in your internet search before you did the keyword search, right?
Correct.
And because you saw them, then you did a keyword search, correct?
Correct.
Same with botulism. That isn't a word you came up with on your own. It was a word that you came up with after seeing it in certain websites, correct?
Correct.
What else? Same with poison, right? That was something you'd seen on the website
No, that's something I chose,
independently.
yes.
Okay. Now, you were trying to get some sense of who the user was here. Is that right? That's how you chose your keywords?
Correct.
And which of these words are Mark's hobbies that you were searching for?
Mark's hobbies.
Yeah.
I don't know of any of Mark's hobbies
Now,
other than financial information.
and by the way, you're aware that Julie Jensen had a Series 7 broker's license?
I wasn't aware of that.
Did you know she worked in the financial field for a number of years?
I didn't.
Did you know she went to nursing school?
No, I didn't.
So you didn't know whether medicine was a particular interest of hers?
I did not.
Did you know whether she took pharmacology classes while she was in nursing school?
I didn't know she was in nursing school.
So you didn't know whether that might be an interest of hers?
I was never told that, no.
Door County, why was that chosen?
I believe I was told that the family had gone to Door County.
And were you told that Mark had been going to Door County with his family since he was a kid?
When he was a kid?
Since he was a kid?
No, sir.
I mean, if somebody would be looking up Door County, it might be Mark, right?
I suppose.
Did Children's Health, did you look up the word children?
I don't recall if I used the word just children.
So you don't know whether there were thousands of hits for the word children?
I don't believe I ran that word.
How about Kids Health? Did you try that?
I don't believe so.
Why do you have Kids Castle?
I believe I was told that is the daycare that one of the Jensen children attended.
Do you know whether they even had a website at that time?
No idea.
Do you know whether if they had a website, whether there was any information that anybody would want if their kid was already enrolled?
I would have no idea.
Paroxetine, do you know that to be the generic term for the drug Paxil?
Yes, I do.
And was there 492 hits?
Appears that way.
And there was evidence on the computer that Paxil had been looked up for about a 3-minute period of time?
I don't recall.
Well, wasn't that the search that was conducted on early morning, December 2nd at about 2:41 a.m., 2:34 a.m.? Looks like from 2:31 to 2:34. That's Exhibit 90 at pages 21 and 22. Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the time?
Sure, you go back. About 2:31 and some seconds until just about 2:35.
You're looking at Exhibit 90?
Okay. Yes.
Well, let's take a break until 1:15. And please don't talk about the case. See you later.